I know what you're after. You got big dreams, don't you? Let's be real. You're dying to get your hands on that Lamborghini, feel the ocean breeze in your face, cruising down the beachside highway in a drop top. But you know the truth. There's only one place where we can do whatever the hell we want. In that one video game, or in our dreams. So listen up. I've got an offer you can't refuse. Hit that like button and I'll take you straight into the limitless world of dreams. Feeling brave, huh? Go ahead. Take a peek at Los Santos and Liberty City. Just don't forget who taught you how to play this game in the first place.
The year was 1984. Vice City was gleaming in the sun like a diamond ring polished on the surface, dirty underneath. The air smelled like salt water, gasoline, and ambition-dodged Jake Callahan lit a cigarette as he leaned against his cherry red Stinger, watching the neon reflections ripple off the hood. Ex-military turned small-time gunrunner. Jake had spent the last 5 years clawing his way through the city's underbelly. From Little Havana to the marinas of Ocean Beach, he wasn't born in vice, but by now it had swallowed him whole. The past didn't matter here, only power, fast money, and how much heat you could dodge before sunrise. That afternoon, Jake received a quiet visit from an old contact Verona, V. Vargas, a Cuban-American fixer with ties to a syndicate, running cargo out of leaf links. She leaned into his window at the cafe on Washington Avenue and said 2 words that made Jake sit up. Colombian shipment. A freighter was arriving tonight under false registration, packed to the steel rafters with uncut product. No cops, no feds, just one crew guarding its hand. They weren't expecting someone like Jake that night. Under the pinkish glow of Vice's never-ending dusk, Jake and his crew roared across the MacArthur Bridge in 2 Black Admirals, silencers loaded, masks tight. As they hit the loading dock near Atlantic Keys, lightning cracked over the bay. Jake moved like a man, reborn cold, quick, unhesitating. He put down 2 guards before they ever knew the game had started. By sunrise, the freighter was stripped, its inventory gone. Jake's warehouse on Starfish Island sat full, humming with the silent potential of a $1 million empire. But word traveled fast in Vice. By noon, the Mendez cartel had placed a bounty on his head. Half the city's mercenaries started sniffing around, and the other half wanted in on the action. Jake Callahan didn't flinch. He lit another cigarette and cracked a grin as the city stirred awake, golden and dangerous. He wasn't afraid of fire. Hell, he was the fire. And in Vice City, fire always rose to the top. The heat of Vice City clung to everything: shirts, leather seats, even the inside of your skull. Jake Callahan adjusted the mirror of his Stinger and rolled down the window, letting the salt-kissed breeze slap him awake. The radio crackled softly, a tune from Glenn Frey warbling through a haze of static as he pulled off Ocean Drive and onto a quieter street, shaded by swaying palms and flickering neon motel signs. The job had gone smooth. Last night, too smooth. He and Frankie Delgado hit a stash house in Little Haiti, walked out with a briefcase full of bearer bonds and a duffel packed with something whiter than the sands of Washington Beach. No alarms, no screaming, just the hush of a half-lit bungalow and a key left under the mat. Somebody wanted that place hid. Jake didn't like that. Now, parked outside Benny's Auto Works near the Viceport docks, he lit a smoke and watched the harbor. Cargo cranes towered over the water like iron giraffes, and the morning sun painted the horizon in gold and gasoline. His contact was late dash again. Frankie emerged from the garage's side entrance, his gold chains swinging in a Hawaiian shirt soaked with grease. Yo, he still ain't show. Jake blew out smoke. He's burning daylight. You want our shot? Make a call, Frankie offered, eyes starting toward a payphone across the street. No, Jake muttered. If he's rattled, he'll spook and run. A cherry-colored convertible cheetah rolled to a stop at the curb, licked the driver's licked hair, mirrored shades, and a smirk that said he owned half the coke in the city nodded once. Jake flicked a cigarette, straightened his collar, and walked up. Nice morning, the driver said, without looking. You, Callahan. Depends on who's asking. The man smirked and popped the glove compartment. Inside was a small envelope sealed with wax. Jake reached for it, but the man placed a hand on it first. Before you touch this, you need to understand, this is not a solo gig. You're part of something now. You go off script, and we both get torched. Jake raised an eyebrow, then took the envelope and tore it open. Inside, a photo of a man in a white linen suit. A wristwatch that could buy a speedboat, and a look in his eyes that said untouchable. A name was scrawled in ink on the back. Miles. Vega. Jake stared at the name, then at the man in the car. What's the play? The driver smiled and pulled away without answering. Tires screeching over the cracked asphalt. Frankie came running over, chewing a toothpick. What did he say? Jake tucked the photo into his jacket. He didn't have to. In Vice City, silence always came with strings attached. And today, Jake could feel the whole damn city tightening around him. He didn't know Vega yet, but that face was about to become the centerpiece of his next power move. The kind of move you didn't walk away from unchanged or alive. Asterisk later that night, Vice City was drowning in neon. The streets shimmered beneath the buzz of 1,000 side liquor stores, jazz clubs, pawn shops glowing like dangerous invitations. The city never truly slept. It just traded one mask for another dot. Jake Callahan cruised through Washington Beach, windows down, the humid air curling the sleeves of his linen shirt. He replayed the moment he saw Miles Vega's photo for the 10th time in his head. There was something in Vega's eyes, a glint, that didn't belong on any mugshot or nightclub promo. It was cold, calculating, professional. Jake had seen that look before, in Panama, on officers who never got their hands dirty unless they meant to bury someone with them. He parked just off Espanola Way, near a cantina known for overpriced drinks and quiet meetings. Inside, the place smelled like cigars, rum, and cover stories. Frankie sat at a booth near the back, nursing a glass of cheap bourbon and trying not to look antsy. About time, Frankie muttered, as Jake slid in across from him. Had to be. Sure I wasn't being followed, Jake said, pulling the photo of Vega and placing it face down on the table. This guy's big. Real estate, clubs, export businesses up and down the coast end. Whispers say he's got Colombians backing him. Frankie swirled the ice in his glass, expression hardening. You think of what I'm thinking? Jake gave a slow nod. We hit him. We're not just starting beef. We're declaring war. The weight of those words lingered. It wasn't just about one man. It was about cutting through the city's golden curtain, tearing down everything clean and respectable to expose the rot underneath before they could say more. A woman approached the table, early 30s, fiery red lips, hair pinned into a loose chignon. She carried herself like she owned the place, or could, if she decided to. You boys look tense, she said, sliding into the booth without asking. Jake raised a brow. We don't know you yet, she said, smirking. The dame's Miranda. I manage one of Vega's waterfront clubs. Saw you the other night, stealing from his friend in Little Haiti. Thought maybe you didn't realize whose toes you stepped on. Jake's hand instinctively hovered near his waistband. She laughed. Relax, cowboy. I'm not here to rat you out. I'm here because Vig is sleeping, and some of us, we're tired of playing the background while he eats off silver plates. Frankie leaned in. So what, you want a seat at the table after the dust settles? I want to help flip the table, Miranda said. His schedule's his weak spots. The front he's hiding behind, I'll give you everything if you guarantee he doesn't get back up. Jake studied her for a long moment. She looked fearless, but fearlessness and vice usually came from one of two places: desperation or experience. You got a car? He asked. Miranda smirked. Better. I got a boat. Jake exchanged a glance with Frankie, then downed the last of his drink. All right, he said. Then let's go poke the lion. Outside, the night waited, humid, electric, and hungry for something to break. And Jake Callahan, as always, was ready to be the one who pulled the trigger first. Jake, Frankie, and Miranda slipped out the back door into the humid night, the neon glow of Vice City flickering off the rain-slick pavement. Instead of cars, Miranda led them toward a sleek, white speedboat tied up at a rusted dock of cigarette smoke halo around the street lamp overhead. The engine thrummed like a living thing as Jake slid into the driver's seat, keys in his palm, and with a twist, the boat leaped forward into the shimmering water. The city skyline stretched behind them, sunset and sirens melding into a single electric haze that trailed in their wake. They cut through the bay toward Vegas Waterfront Club, the Pelican Lounge, parked under a string of battered buoys. Miranda, beside Jake, pulled out a satchel, thick with dossiers hand-drawn maps of service entrances, guard schedules, and security blind spots. She whispered each detail into the humid air, how the main dock doors clicked open at 2 a.m., the sequence for the security keypads, even the exact moment the bouncer took his coffee break. Frankie huddled behind them with a flashlight and his duffel of gear, nodded along so intensely his Hawaiian shirt fluttered taut as they neared the club's private pier. The distant thump of reggae mixed with the splash of waves against the hull. Jake revved the throttle and eased the boat alongside a shadowed section of Dock the One Miranda, pinpointed as lightly guarded. In one fluid motion, Frankie jumped off the side, boots hitting the planks with a soft crack, while Miranda unclipped a coil of rope to tie off their ride. Jake killed the engine. Silence felt thicker than the humid air. They clambered aboard the dock in a practiced, wordless rhythm. Inside the club, velvet curtains and gold leaf ceilings masked the true operations happening beneath. Patrons sipped rum punch under a mirrored disco ball, oblivious to the armed crew slipping behind the scenes. Miranda guided them down a narrow service hall where pipes dripped and the palms of painted murals peeled away. At the end of the corridor, marked by a half-moon stain on the concrete, Frankie knelt by a small metal panel, his multi-tool glinting in the dim. A soft click, a faint buzz, and the door swung open to reveal crates stamped with the Vegas logo on one side and Colombian seals on the other. Jake slipped inside first, the smell of fresh tobacco and expensive leather giving way to the sharp tank of industrial flourishes, rubber hoses, electrical conduits, and pallets piled high with unmarked boxers. He froze for a second at the sight of armed goons lounging around the crates, half-heartedly guarding the real prize, a pallet of unheard-of purity. Miranda pressed a finger to her lips, and Frankie moved up silently behind the largest guard, clamping his hand over the man's mouth. The guard's eyes widened, realizing too late that his coffee break intel had been reversed on him. Within seconds, another guard spun around, but Jake met him mid-swing with a swift uppercut, sending him sprawling into the stacks. Frankie hauled open the crates as Miranda kept watch from the threshold. The first box popped open, revealing vacuum-sealed bricks of white that reflected the scant light like forged diamonds. Frankie whistled low. "This'll crash markets," he muttered, stuffing the first package into a duffel and shoving the sample. Next, and immediately, behind him, the hum of conversation in the lounge grew louder. Somebody was checking on the absence of their prize. Miranda slipped out to the hallway to scope for reinforcements. When she returned, pale-faced, she signaled 2 more sleepers on the floor near the kitchen staff's prep room. Jake calculated their exit, back the way they came, or slipped through the underground tunnel system Viga's secret escape route, now mapped in their hands. He chose the tunnel, a water-soaked crawl space that led them under the club and out to a service shed on the opposite block. Floors dripped, pipes hissed, and every step felt like peeling back another layer of Vegas. Mysterious operations. Finally, they burst out into a back alley, crates clutched tight, adrenaline surging through their veins. Tina's Diner's neon sign flickered overhead as they dashed to the boat. Boots splashing through puddles and echoing off derelict brick. Jake slammed the throttle. The boat shuddered and rose onto plane as pursuit lights danced on the shore, Viga's patrol launch cutting through the water after them. Frankie leaned out, tossing 2 smoke grenades back at the dock. Shimmering plumes of white blossomed, blocking the path behind them. They roared into the bay, hearts hammering in sync with the engine's note. Miranda collapsed against the seat, breath ragged with exhilaration. Jake guided the boat under a bridge, its concrete arches swallowing the chase boat's searchlight. By the time they emerged on the other side, the pursuit was lost in the city's echoing arterial waterways. The skyline glowed like a promised dot. As dawn tipped into morning, they beached the boat behind an abandoned breaker station. The moonlit trophies sat heavy on the deck, proof that they'd done more than hurt Viga's empire they'd shattered, its core supply. Jake climbed out and looked back at the glowing horizon. Palm trees trembled in the light breeze, and the city yawned awake. Their scars would heal before nightfall, but Vice City would remember the strike. Frankie hoisted the last crate over his shoulder, grinning like a kid with a new toy. Miranda patted Jake's shoulder, silent salute to the plan's perfection. And Jake, exhaling the night's tension, simply stared at the glittering towers of neon and chrome. He knew this job would force Vega's hand, sending the lion into open conflict. But for now, he felt the quiet triumph of men who danced close to fire and come away unburned. Vice City, power whispered in the wake of their boat, a pledge set in motion by 3 ghosts rising in the neon tides. Asterisk. The first light of dawn seeped through the grime on the safe house windows as Jake Callahan surveyed the fruits of their night's labor. Crates of Colombian purity lay piled in the corner, each brick wrapped and labeled for quick sale. Frankie Delgado paced around them, humming an off-key tune to keep his nerves in check, while Miranda leaned against a peeling wall, arms folded, eyes bright with triumphant fire. For a blissful moment, the city's weight seemed to lift from there. Shoulders Vice City's neon frenzy was miles away, muted by distance and desperation, but victory and Vice always came stamped with a warning. By mid-morning, the first tremors of Viga's retaliation shook the block. A black-crowned Victoria idled outside the diner across the street, its passenger window down just enough to frame a crooked badge and a wry grin. Deputy Russo, Viga's well-paid ally on the Viceport PD, strolled in, flashing a warrant and a smirk that promised trouble. "I'm afraid you boys are gonna have to come with me," Russo said, voice silky but edged with menace. got reports of a late-night fireworks showdown at the Pelican. Best come help with the investigation. Jake exchanged a glance with Frankie. Miranda's lip curled at the sight of Russo's badge. Not tonight, officer, Jake replied, breathing easy even as his mind raced. We've got pressing business here. Russo's smile curdled. He stepped forward and slapped handcuffs on the table. Then, I'll be back with reinforcements. Don't think Vega's gonna sit on his hands. Word on the street is, you stole his best stuff straight from under his nose. The cop rose, fists clenched, and left as quietly as he'd arrived just. Another warning that the wolves were at their door. No time to celebrate, no rest for the ambitious. In less than an hour, Viasport's finest would do more than investigate. They'd try to frame or kill them. Jake closed the ledger he'd been keeping and handed it to Frankie. Load it all back up. We're moving to 9 new location. Tighter security. Miranda, prep your boat. We'll take these bricks offshore and settle the score before they can corner us. He didn't pause for argument. In the face of a judge and a badge, the hierarchy dissolved. Tonight's hustle was about survival. As the sun dipped low and Vice City's neon heartbeat returned, the trio slipped out, reshuffling spoils into hidden compartments beneath a battered panel van. Miranda led them to a secluded marina, where her speedboat's leak, silent and painted pure white, waited under a tarpaulin. The black Crown Vic that had patrol led barely registered on their radar now. Just another glimmer in the placid harbor lights. They roared off into the bay, the city skyline receding until only a hazy silhouette remained. Offshore, they docked at a rusted pier that serviced to supply ships in an old coal terminal long since abandoned. There they transferred the merchandise to crates bolted into a secluded warehouse owned by one of Jake's offshore backers. The echo of waves lapping against the hull was a lullaby for the moment. But even the sea couldn't wash away the poisoned promise of Viguer's wrath. Back on shore, Jake convened a midnight strategy meeting in the warehouse's stank office. Maps strewn across a sod-scalded table, flashlights for lamps. Frankie marked the streets where the police would swing by. Miranda highlighted places where Vega's men might lie in wait, and Jake carved out safe routes that threaded like veins through the city's underbelly. Vega's got muscle and money, Jake said, voice low as gravel. But he didn't break me in Little Haiti, and he sure as hell won't break me now. We hit him where it hurt, stake out his cash flows, sabotage the docks he uses to offload, burn his club down, and make it public, show everyone he can't. Protect his own empire. He paused, locking eyes with each of them in turn. He'll come for us, but we'll be ready. And when we're done, Vice City will know that Jake Callahan doesn't just steal Alliance cargo. He kills the king. Miranda's expression hardened. I've got a list of his key front's luxury safe houses, front companies, offshore accounts. We pick 3 targets, strike at midnight, and disappear by sunrise. No casualties we can't handle. Then we rendezvous here for final extraction. Frankie cracked his knuckles. Sounds like a war. I'm in. Over the next 48 hours, the crew became ghosts. They split up, using stolen identities and burner phones. Jake and Frankie took out a perimeter camera system at Vega's main warehouse, smashing lenses and wiring until the yard was blind. Miranda infiltrated Vega's yacht club disguised as a waitress, planting bugs and snapping photos of shipping manifests that tied his cargo runs to corrupt PD officials. At midnight, the next night, they struck unstrung. Explosives set. Each hit choreographed to precision. Explosions ripped through warehouse doors and club back rooms, sending shockwaves that lit the sky bright enough to ease the hunger of the city's gawkers. Vega's empire trembled as fire consumed prized vessels and product, radioed an SOS to the docks, and flooded his handlers with panicked texts. Jake and Frankie were long gone. their footprints buried in the river of smoke trailing eastward, while Miranda slipped away on her yacht as the hull of Vega's flagship burned like a beacon died by dawn. Vice City police swarmed the wreckage. Deputy Russo had his squad, cameras rolling, capturing the depravity of a fallen king. Yet not one face from Jake's crew was seen. Their warehouse remained untouched, their prizes secured offshore. Jake stood on a balcony, overlooking the ocean, the first sunlight glinting off his Stinger's hood and off the trophy case of his Triumph. Frankie joined him, tossing a lighter into the wind for Vega's ruined yacht club. Not bad for a night's work, Frankie said. Jake lit a cigarette and watched the smoke drift into the sea breeze. He'll come back harder, but it will. Welcome him. This city is ours to test. He let the moment stretch, sipping victory like a fine whiskey. We fought the lion and didn't blink. Now we rule the jungle. Below, the city awoke. Sirens and headlines already whispering about the mysterious attacks, the vanishing thieves, and the silent reckoning of Los Santos. In that golden haze of dawn, Jake Callahan knew his name would ring louder than any syndicate. Kings, the American who conquered the heart of Vice City and walked away unscathed. And as his crew gathered below, ready for the next gamble, he realized the only thing sharper than a thrum of risk was the gleam of absolute power. Vice City had changed. So had he. Asterisk. Months passed in Vice City, like a restless heartbeat, throbbing with neon sweat, danger. Jake Callahan's name spread through the streets on the same breath as legends. Just as whispered rumors of his impossible heist to the Pelican Lounge and the resulting inferno reached every crooked ear. His crew had transformed from low-level runners into the city's most elusive power players. Police had placed their marks with surgical precision, disrupted Vega's network so completely that even the cartel's back channels radiated with confusion. Now, in the eye of that storm they'd created, they carved out territory that no one dared challenge. On the surface, Vice and Velvet reigned supreme. Frankie Delgado lounged in the back booth of a speakeasy club they'd acquired in Washington. Beached its walls, dressed in black leather, its bartenders serving rare scotches imported straight from Edinburgh, its clientele a mix of coke-laced socialites and street-tough mercenaries looking to disappear beneath safety and indulgence. Miranda, now head of logistics and intel, oversaw the club's operations with an iron will behind ruby lipstick. Every shipment guns, cash, information filtered through her watch. Jake himself settled into a new routine. Mornings spent poring over financial ledgers in an office that overlooked the bay. Afternoons sailing the intracoastal waterway in his restored Marquis cruiser. Evenings entertaining VIPs under a canopy of multicolored bulbs and champagne fizz. Yet even paradise in Vice City bore an undercurrent of paranoia. The law, now heavily bribed, kept its distance. The cartels, humiliated and beaten, retreated to lick wounds and plan revenge. And a new player of shadow from Jake's own past loomed on the horizon. Rumors swirled of a former CIA operative turned ghost broker, someone who had tutored Jake in those early gun-running days. Spectre was his code name, and whispered. Legend said he dealt in arms so advanced they made silencers obsolete. Where Jake had established an empire made of fire and blood, Spectre's war chest would take him to a different echelon. One where governments and insurgencies played in a league above street kings. Jake learned of Spectre's arrival on a muggy dawn when a secure line crackled to life. Callahan came to voice-sized with authority. Heard you burned, my boy. One time too many. Let's talk terms. No time for doubt. Jake crushed the phone in his palm, the faint snap echoing appeared behind him, her expression unreadable. Frankie hovered nearby, restless as always. Jake exhaled slowly. We either meet him on our ground or his. One say, ours. They spent the day strategizing in the speakeasy's hidden vault. Walls lined with seized contraband, bundles of marked bills, gay weapons, and a trophy case of jade green emeralds lifted from a Colombian palace. Each asset was a token of their ascent. Each one now represented a target. That night, they met Spectre at a deserted airstrip in the Everglades, where the only lights were the dim glow of runway beacons and the flash of fireflies tangled in Spanish moss. Lockheed C-130 sat on the tarmac, ready for missions that never appeared on any manifest. Spectre emerged from the shadows and tailored black, a ghost in every sense no introduction needed. He offered a curt nod, then laid down his terms. Share the docks, split corridors of smuggling routes, and agreed to a truce enforced by both their men. He smiled once, showing a row of perfect teeth. These streets, he said softly, are mine to test too. Jake felt the weight of his own rise settle in his bones. He could take Spectre's terms, carve out a cushioned peace, and keep his empire intact. Or he could refuse risk all that they built on a gamble that his crew's loyalty and firepower would outmatch an ex-book's black ops. He looked at Miranda, whose eyes reflected every late-night dossier she'd compiled. He caught Frankie's clenched jaw, a silent dare glinting there. Finally, Jake spoke. We stand as equals, no quarters, no safe words. This city runs on power, not peace. You can try to share it, or you can try to steal it. His crew flanked him, a living wall of resolve. Spectre's nod came as slow as fate. He withdrew a knife from his belt and, blade flat, slid it across his palm. He offered his hand to Jake. Jake allowed one drop of his own blood to stain Spectre's blade. When the two men clasped in that crimson handshake, it felt less like an alliance and more like a pact written in iron. The nights that followed saw Vice City shimmer with renewed tension. Spies from both camps fanned out, informants in bottle service lounges, sniper scopes perched on penthouse terraces, and encrypted chatter humming through dead-end phone lines. But for Jake's crew, the fire had never burned brighter. Vegas style, parties masked clandestine shipments, each celebration a display of defiance. They reinforced safe houses with walls so thick even tanks would struggle to crack them. They placed men in every barbershop, hotel lobby, and marina slip, crafting a web of watches that ensured nothing moved without their knowledge. In that crucible, Frankie discovered a plot. Spectre's men planned to hijack a high-value shipment of gold bullion aboard a freighter bound for Brasilia. If they succeeded, they'd hold a king's ransom and demoralize Jake's ranks. Jake studied the ledger, cross-referenced routines, and devised an ambush that only a man born of Vice City's chaos could conceive. On a humid night, when the bay waters lay as smooth as glass, he and his crew moved like wraiths, striking at the freighter's crew in unmarked speedboats, dismantling the takeover with pinpoint gunfire and precision diversion. By sunrise, the gold was in their hands. Spectre's agents lay subdued or swimming for shore. And the city awoke to rumors of another impossible strike as dawn spilled over the horizon. Jake stood on the deck of his cruiser, the bullion bars stacked behind him like trophies. He lit a cigar and inhaled deeply, the smoke curling into the pastel sky. Miranda's voice crackled through his earpiece. Spectre's pissed, is pulling every fiber to retaliate. Taliant. Beside him, smirking. Let him. We'll settle the score on his home turf next time. Turning off the channel, Jake exhaled a big blue plume. My city was theirs to lose, but only if they let fear override their ambition. He thought of the American dream he'd chased. Here, the promise of reinvention, seizing a destiny that once seemed only possible in the movies. Now, standing at the nexus of power, he realized that he'd become both the hero and the villain in his own story. Behind him, the city throbbed with possibilities and bothers. On South Beach, elegant voices in swanky lounges, the faint drone of helicopters circling overhead. One life could be snuffed out in an instant, another could be built in a single, bold move. Jake took one last drag of his cigar and flicked the ember into the sea. A new game starts now. He murmured to the soft breeze, and we play until the last neon light fades. In the glow of the rising sun, the empire of Jake Callahan stood unbroken, an American kingpin, forged in the merciless crucible of Vice City, ready for whatever final reckoning the night would bring. The humid air crackled with tension the night the war drums finally broke loose. Jake Callahan stood at the prow of his Marquis as it cut through the ink-black water, city lights arcing behind him like distant stars. He'd received word at dusk. Spectre was moving in with everything he had. Hamstring mercenaries, military-grade hardware, even a borrowed Coast Guard cutter, painted black. Tonight, the Ghost Broker's men would descend on the Pelican ruins. It's a shell of Viga's old club that Jake had claimed as his own staging ground. If Spectre succeeded, every front Jake built would collapse. Miranda and Frankie flanked him on deck, as weapons at the ready, grit lining their faces. Frankie checked his Thompson in a steady rhythm, while Miranda's phone buzzed constant intel, patrol boat slip assignments, perimeter motion sensors Spectre had deployed, the flight path for a stealth drone overhead. Jake inhaled the brine sweet, breathed and exhaled slowly. "We don't fight fair," he reminded them. "Let's give these ghosts something to haunt." They slipped beneath the Pelican's broken dark wooden pillars, pounded by relentless tide's end, entered a hidden ladder Jake had installed months ago. Up in the crumbling ballroom, stained glass windows through fractured prisms across busted tables and rusted chrome pillars. The stage, once striped in velvet, now held sandbags and sand-filled tires. This was their fortress. The first shockwave hit like a thunderclap outside. Thunderous, churning and splintered wood signaled Spectre's cutter, smashing through pilings. Frankie dashed to the broken windows and fired warning shots at men. Crawling up the dock ladders, their AK-47 fire rattled the pillars as Miranda triggered the club's interior sirens warped. Electric howl that masked footsteps. Jake raised his voice and bellowed, "Welcome to the ashes." As smoke grenades exploded at the entrances, bullets ricocheted off tile and plasterbud. Jake's crew knew every alcove. Frankie, heart pounding, vaulted over a collapsed bar and laid down suppressing fire. Miranda sprinted to the back corridor, jerry-rigging the lights so they flickered out just as Spectre's stealth drone buzzed to life overhead, its night vision optics blinded by strobing flashes. Jake moved like a ghost himself, slipping behind Spectre's point man and snapping his neck before the shock-crazed mercenary even saw the punch coming. Outside, the cutter's deck flooded with rival pursuers, clambering aboard 20 strong, all trained to hunt ghosts. Miranda reloaded with mechanical precision, then collapsed the double doors with a shotgun blast, sending splinters onto two men who'd breached the lobby. Frankie knocked a third back with a headshot that echoed into the ballroom's rafters. The fight swirled in swirling arcs of sparks and shattered tiles. Spectre himself arrived lastly, suit jacket torn at the shoulder, cobalt eyes glinting like knives. He carried carried a silenced pistol, and, for one heartbeat, locked eyes with Jake across the broken dance floor. No words were spoken. Then, like lightning, both men moved. Spectre fired the first 3 controlled shots that drilled tile and kicked up. Dust, Jake rolled sideways, drawing his .45 and returning fire in a single, fluid motion that sent Spectre skidding over a pool of spilled bourbon. He recovered instantly, barreled into Jake's flank, and slammed him shoulder first into the ornate remnants of the bar, which splintered, mirrors busted. Rinky's shout cut through the chaos. Jake, Miranda dove into the fray, tackling Spectre's second to command, so hard the man's pistol flew into a martini fountain. She snapped his wrist with practiced force, then vaulted atop the smashed bar and leveled her shotgun at the back wall, sealing off the entrance Spectre's reinforcements were using. "You're not getting in here, Nick," she yelled, voice raw with defiance. Jake squared off against Spectre in the debris choked center. Bullets whined past, but neither flinched. Tease. Smirk widened as he slapped a hand onto a broken pillar, dislodging a chunk of metal pipe. They circled, breathing ragged, steel nerves engaged. Finally, Jake feinted left, ducked under Spectre's swing, and landed a hammering right to the ribs and knocked the wind out of him. Spectre stumbled backward into a shattered grand pianoette, strings twanging like ghostly laughter as the lid collapsed. Frankie joined Jake at Spectre's side, leveling a pistol at the operative's temple. Spectre coughed blood and spat. "This city." He tried to rise, but his last breath was a gurgle. Jake nodded once. Frankie pulled the trigger, echoing across the ruins. Silence fell as the gunfire ceased. Randa switched off the emergency. Siren, the only sound, was the hum of the tide beneath the ruined dock. Jake surveyed the scene. Spectre's mercs were pinned behind collapsed columns, dropping weapons in surrender. Frankie bound their wrists with zip ties. Miranda barked orders into her phone, calling in a favor to ensure no PD backup arrived to complicate things down at Dawn's Edge. Vice City's purple haze peeked through the gaps in the broken stained glass, spotlighting Jake's trio amidst the carnage. He wiped sweat and blood from his brow, breathed in the saltine air, and felt an unshakable calm. They'd faced the ghost broker's wrath and lived on the night. Miranda approached and slid a cigarette into his hand. "You okay?" she asked. Jake lit it, exhaling a plume that drifted toward the broken ceiling. "Better," he said quietly. "My city just learned who it really belongs to." Frankie wiped his brow and cracked a grin. "You think Mayor Diaz will be hosting any peace talks now?" Jake flicked ash into the dark. "Only one peace I know one between me and this city, and I never break a promise." Above them, the first seagulls woke over the bay. Sand and blood intermingled on the battered dance floor. As the horizon glowed pink, Jake Callahan stood among the ruins of war. Empire, forged in steel and fire. True king of Vice City, untouchable, unbowed, and free to rewrite every rule in neon and chrome. Asterisk. 6 months later, Vice City's neon hearts still beat to the rhythm of Jake Callahan's ambition. The Pelican Ruins had been rebuilt this time as a sleek waterfront casino called the Docks, its glass walls reflecting the bay and the private yachts bobbing in the marina. Inside, chandeliers dripped crystals over poker tables, and the hum of slot machines mingled with the low pulse of house music. Jake stood at the edge of the crowded floor, cigar in hand, surveying the crowd. Crooked politicians giving toasts, mercenaries counting chips in corner booths, and socialites unaware that each empty cocktail glass carried a silent auction for contraband favors. Miranda hovered at his side, dressed in a tailored white suit that gleamed under the casino lights. $2 million in buy-ins by midnight, she reported, voice low. And Vega's front men just wired another $500,000 for private blackjack. Behind them, Frankie Duggadon, now sporting a custom tuxedo-clinked glasses with the head of a Panamanian shipping cartel. Every handshake, every whisper deal, and every spinning roulette wheel spun Jake's web tighter around the city's pulse. Yet, even as he savored the rush of power, Jake felt the familiar tug of unease. From the vantage of the VIP balcony, he saw a sleek, black sedan idling at the dock's entrance. A single, tinted window rolled down, revealing a pair of unblinking eyes and unmarked envelopes slid across the leather seat. Moments later, a valet carried it in. Inside, photographs of offshore accounts drained, properties seized in the Caymans, and a single line scrawled across the top: "Pay the piper." No signature, no threat, just the promise of a reckoning. That night, deep in the casino's subterranean cigar lounge, Jake convened his inner circle. Miranda spread the photos on a marble tabletop. Frankie flicked a lighter, the flame illuminating his clenched jaw. Spectre's ghost. Frankie muttered, I thought I buried that guy in the print. Everglades. Miranda shook her head. Too professional. These hits are routed through government backdoors. Someone higher up is pulling strings. A hush fell as the implications settled. This demand came not from street rivals, but from the corridors of power federal agencies and international interest threatened by Jake's empire. The city's newfound respect had blurred the line between vice lord and kingpin, and now the world was calling its debts. Jake inhaled a plume of smoke and exhaled it deliberately. "We built this from ash and steel," he said, voice measured. "If the system wants its cut, we'll give him a seat at the table on our terms." He tapped the photos. "We identify who's behind this, negotiate the deal, or dismantle their muzzle before they move on us. Tonight, we play chess, not checkers." Over the next days, the docks became ground zero for an invisible war. Miranda coordinated encrypted meetings with deep cover informants in D and Interpol. Frankie orchestrated diversions, rigged to slot, machines that paid out in counterfeit chips, phony shipments misdirected to decoy warehouses. And Jake, ever the strategist, leveraged his political contacts. Senator Alvarez owed him a favor, and the city's mayor was negotiating a discreet arrangement to support local tourism if Jake's casino stayed open. Every piece moved as planned, every door opened or slammed in precise harmony. Then came the breakthrough. A tip from an insider at the port of Miami revealed that the black sedan bore diplomatic plates belonging to a shell embassy known for laundering illicit funds. Behind it was a consortium of foreign officials and U.S. agents who had grown rich off Vice City's underworld. Their demand for payment wasn't a negotiation tactic, it was a levy to maintain the status quo. They wanted Jake to surrender half his revenues or face coordinated raids that would crumble his empire. Overnight, Jake realized this was a vote of no confidence in his ruling style. To concede would mean ceding his throne. To refuse would ignite an all-out assault from forces armed with infinite budgets and legal firepower. He gathered Miranda and Frankie in his penthouse atop the dock's tower, the city lights sprawling beneath them like a glittering battlefield. "Option 1, he said, voice low. "We paid them off and become their puppet tower casinos and clubs, turned into tributaries for their coffers. Option 2, we dismantle every asset they cherish, seize their ships, expose their corruption in the press, and watch their reputations drowned in international scandal. Then we rebuild what's lost, and show them that in Vice City, no law can lock down the ghosts who built the empire." Miranda traced a route on a holographic map. "We hit their embassy warehouse at dawn, released documents to the media, hacked their communications, and disappear before the PD can respond. The blow will be swift and public. Frankie cracked, his knuckles, a grin playing on his lips. I love the smell of panic in the morning. Jake nodded once, eyes fixed on the horizon where sky met sea. Then let's remind them what it means to cross Callahan. At first light, Jake's crew launched their campaign, a covert strike. Team former sailors and ex-special ops Jake had vetted boarded the Shell Embassy's warehouse, covering crates labeled diplomatic immunity, filled with falsified paperwork, untraceable funds, and classified contracts brimming with bribery details. Simultaneously, Miranda's hackers breached government servers, uploading the documents to global news networks and torrent sites. Frankie's diversions kept law enforcement chasing shadows, suspicious calls, false alarms at rival clubs, and phantom sightings of Jake at distant locales. Within hours, headlines around the world exploded. Vice City scoundrels expose international embassy scandals, corrupt officials named in document dump, and Callahan Empire defies federal crackdown. Press conferences were canceled, diplomatic offices shuttered, and agencies distanced themselves from the scandal, whispering blame to unknown cyber vandals. In the chaos, Jake's holdings remained untouched. His casino, thriving as patrons flocked to witness the bold underdoghood speeding the system. As the editorials praised the mysterious crusader for transparency, Jake stood on the penthouse balcony. Once more, the morning sun gilding his empire. Miranda joined him, sipping espresso, while Frankie, in the distance, coordinated security upgrades. For a fleeting moment, the city's noise faded into a hum of possibility. Jake exhaled a grin. They wanted their pound of flesh. Instead, we gave them a scalpel to slice their own throats. He flicked ash into the wind. Vice City vows to no law, no money, and no empire except mine. Below, the docks and casinos roared back to life, neon and brass, forging the soundtrack of a city reborn in his image. And as the tides lapped against the seawall, Jake Callahan, American dream made flesh, and the neon haze knew that he had not only survived the ghosts of his past, but turned them into the foundation of a legacy that would outlast every siren song and every shifting law. Vice City was, once again, unmistakably his. The midday sun burned off the last tendrils of dawn's haze, turning Vice City's skyline into a glittering wall of glass and steel. From the balcony of the docks, Jake Callahan surveyed his domain with a predator's focus. The casinos, neon signs, the luxury yachts lining the marina, the gleaming high-rises where his front companies filed their tax returns. Everything ran like clockwork until the first unsettling text arrived on his secure line. We have Miranda, no signature, no negotiation only. The image of her bound at a rain-slick loading dock in Little Havana, guarded by 3 men in black tactical gear. The message pinged through at exactly 2:17 p.m., the hour when Miranda would be overseeing a shipment of high-grade electronics bound for a discreet buyer overseas. Jake's heart stuttered, then hammered. In seconds, he was on his feet, his crew alerted by the silent alarm he'd installed in every safe house. Frankie Delgado met him at the elevator, face pale but eyes blazing. "They've got her," he said, without preamble. "These guys move like ex-military. And they're not Spectres different, Mo. Heavier hardware." Jake nodded, pocketing the phone. "All right, we going hard and fast. Give me every scrap of intel on that dock. Surveillance cams, shift rotations, escape routes." Frankie whipped out a burner tablet and tapped into their dark web channels, racing to gather blueprints and feed from hijacked CCTV. By dusk, Jake's tactical team had encircled the waterfront, a dozen of his most trusted operators, former Navy SEALs, Marine vets, and one ex-CIA demolitions expert teach briefing, printed on waterproof paper. Frankie and Jake reviewed the layout of the abandoned fish processing plant where Miranda was held, a concrete labyrinth of catwalks, cold storage rooms, and rusted hatches. Every corridor meant danger. Every angle could conceal an ambush. "We move at 2,200 sharp," Jake ordered. Alpha team takes the front entrance. Bravo approaches from the canal behind. I'll go in with Charlie, cut through the freezer, and find Miranda. No mistakes. Under a moonless sky, 3 black speedboats slip through the canal. Their engines whisper quiet, thanks to custom exhausts. Jake crouched at the prow of the lead boat, night vision goggles giving the riverbank an eerie green sheen. Frankie's voice crackled in his earpiece. "You're clear to guards at the main gate, one patrolling the north catwalk." Jake slid ash off his cigar and flicked his wrist. "Alpha, take the gate. Charlie, be ready to breach the freezer." Within seconds, silencers spat muffled cracks as 2 night stalkers in wetsuits neutralized the guards. Jake and Charlie slipped ashore, melting into the shadows of stacked crates and industrial piping. Gone inside, the air stung of ammonia and salt. Jake signaled Charlie to breach a heavy steel door labeled Freezer Number 3. Green laser sights danced over rivets before Charlie's breaching charge popped the hinges. They slipped through into a vast chamber of hanging fish carcasses, dim red lights simulating sunrise for storage. Miranda lay on a platform at the far end, tied to a pallet with nylon strap size fierce, even in her prisoner's power. 2 goons with the submachine guns turned at the blast. But Jake moved faster. 1 solid punch to the jaw, 1 to the solar plexus, and the first dropped in a heap of fish guts. Charlie covered Jake as he untied Miranda, sprang up and signaled they were almost clearing till the control room's alarm siren ripped through the plant. Overhead lights flickered on, revealing half a dozen black-clad shooters converging on their position. Frankie's voice raised through the comms. "They've locked down the front. You've got 15 seconds to exfil or get pinned." Jake slung Miranda's arm over his shoulder. "Charlie, cover. Let's move." They sprinted across the lick flooring, submachine gun cracks echoing off concrete as Charlie ran interference. Miranda, pressing close, whispered through gritted teeth, "Jake, hurry." At the exit ramp, Bravo team's boats fired AR burst at pursuing men on the catwalk, missiles of tracer rounds reflecting in the canal's murky water. Frankie and 2 others dragged a forklift onto the ramp, blades roaring as they crushed barricades, giving Jake and Miranda the gap they needed. They spilled onto the dock, jumping into the waiting speedboat. Jake leaned back to exchange fire, with the last 2 guards subduing them with controlled bursts. Miranda snatched Jake's hand as the boat pushed away from the quay. The processing plant receding in a haze of muzzle flashes and warning lights. Frankie's boat fell in behind, escorting them under the first glimmers of pre-dawn orange. By 0230, they glided into the hidden marina beneath the dock safe. Bloodied, but unbroken dot in the quiet of his private office. Jake unwrapped Miranda's arm and pressed ice to her bruise. She looked up at him, exhausted, furious, alive. Frankie stood guard outside the door, rifle ready. Miranda grasped Jake's shirt front. "Who are these guys?" she rasped. Jake met her gaze with calm fire. "Someone who thinks they can cloud my empire, but they haven't learned yet. You don't kidnap my ghost and walk away." As the first neon flickers of Vice City reignited below, Jake Callahan realized the war for his soul and throne was far from over. New players had entered the board. And now, with Miranda by his side and Frankie backing him, he would strike back. Because in Vice City, power demanded one ultimate truth. The only way to keep an empire was to never let it sleep. Asterisk, Jake Callahan stood in the center of a silent penthouse, suit still dusted with salt from the bay winds, a half-empty glass of bourbon in his hand. Below, Vice City roared to life yachts humming in the marina, clubs pulsing with synthwave and secrets, high-rises sparkling like a skyline dipped in chrome and hunger. The empire he built stretched into every corner of the city, but the message from Miranda's abduction still echoed in his chest like a loaded chamber left unfired. He replayed the night's events in his mind, how precise the attackers were, how disciplined. No street gang, no cartel pawn. These weren't mercenaries for hire. They were trained, silent, surgical, and they'd failed. That meant they'd come again. Only louder-eyed Miranda entered the room without knocking, a bandage wrapped around her arm and determination in her stride. "We've got a name," she said. Jake turned slowly. "You sure?" She nodded. "Project Eclipse, a black budget contractor, supposed to have disbanded in '85, but some of them went freelance. Ran ops in Nicaragua, Angola, Caracas. They specialize in removing disruptive assets." Her gaze met his. "That's you now." Jake placed his glass on the bar. "So they see Vice City as compromised. They see it as yours," she replied, "which makes it dangerous." Frankie joined them moments later, flipping the folder onto the counter. Inside were aerial shots of a compound tucked between the palms of Noir, the maps off the radar. A makeshift base, coastal, private, and crawling with veterans who'd long since stopped fighting wars for flags. "Got this from a Colombian contact," Frankie said. "Cost me 2 favors and my last Cuban cigar." Jake studied the layout. Boat slips, helipads, long-range antennas, gun emplacements concealed in faux beach huts. Eclipse had a war chest, but Jake had something strong resolved, built from fire and blood. "We go in before they decide to take another swing," said Doc. Miranda raised a brow. "You're serious?" "I'm done being hunted," Jake replied. "We cut the head off this thing. Eclipse dies on Narada Key." Frankie grinned, half excited, half terrified. "We'll need bodies, quiet ones." "They're ready," Jake said. "Every hand that's ever owed us favors. Old dock rats from Little Haiti, disgraced contractors, bone deep, oil." Miranda leaned on the edge of the bar. "What's the play? Put 2 teams. One hits the waterline with explosives take. Out comes and escape routes. The second breaches from the jungle side, silent and fast. We neutralize command. Take prisoners. If they're smart, burn the place. If they're not, but no press, no bodies, only evening news. This war ends before it ever makes print." She considered him for a long moment. "And if Eclipse has someone bigger backing them?" Jake didn't blink. "Then we send them the same message. Vice City is off the board." By midnight, they sailed on the moonlight-marked boats, ghosting toward Narada's uncharted shore. Silencers checked. Come set to whisper. Jake, Frankie, Miranda, and a platoon of street-forged warriors ready to end the Shadow War the way they'd ended every threat before. Quietly, ruthlessly, and without leaving a name behind, at dawn, as fire bloomed over Narada's palm-lined horizon, only Jake's flag flew, not stitched or sewn, just a single silver ace card drifting in the tide, and far away, in a penthouse atop the docks, a fresh bottle of bourbon sat unopened. waiting for the king to come home. The thunder cracked just as Jake Callahan stepped onto the helipad at the docks. The city skyline swallowed in a churning wall of storm clouds. Rain came down in sheets, slicing through the heat like truth through illusion. It was the kind of Vice City night that made legends. He hadn't slept since Narada compound was ashes, the names encrypted on his drives, sent to the four corners of the digital underworld. Clips was no more, but in their death throes, they'd unleashed a ripple. One Jake could feel threading through the bones of the city. Friends turned silent, bankers stalled. A federal task force was reviewing casino licensure and helicopters had circled the docks 3 nights in a row without landing. Tonight, Jake would end it, not with an explosion, with a ground. He entered the hidden chamber beneath the casino, the vault. Once a bomb shelter, now a fortified boardroom wrapped in steel and darkness. Frankie stood at one end of the long table, tapping his cane like a metronome for war. Miranda sat at the other, clutching a dossier labeled simply Chimera. It was the name behind the name untraceable fund that tied the city's oldest families, rogue fads, offshore elites, and Eclipse's original architects into one sinuous, invisible serpent. Everything points to Chimera, Miranda said. They've owned Vice since the 50s. Real estate, media, utilities. Even the cops whisper their name like folklore. Jake stared at the dossier. And now, they're scared, Frankie said. You changed the rules. When you turned Eclipse to vapor, you sent a message they can't ignore. So they're coming to you with velvet gloves. If you've got a seat at the table. The table. Jake cracked his knuckles, then opened the dossier. Inside, an invitation, embossed, lacquered. One location, Evergreen Tower, 99th floor. One time, -midnight. Miranda watched him closely. You don't have to go. Once you're in that room, you're not just a king of ice. You're part of something older, colder, and it never lets go. Jake folded the invitation and tucked it into his jacket. They made this city on backroom handshakes and quiet ruin. I made mine on blood, flame, and every soul who ever bet against me. He turned to Frankie. Get the car, as the storm broke. Jake's bulletproof déclassé Verona pulled up to Evergreen Tower, flanked by 2 unmarked sedans. The building loomed, black glass vanishing into mist. Inside, a private elevator waited, untouched by the storm. The ascent was silent. When the doors opened on the 99th floor, it revealed a glass-walled room glowing with candlelight and menace. A semicircle of 7 waited, suits tailored to silence. Watches worth more than mansions. Jake walked into their arc like a thunderclap. Wrapped in linen, one of them, a woman with hair like snow and eyes like knives, gestured to the chair. Mr. Callahan, we've read your file. Jake sat, crossed his legs, lit a cigarette with the invitation. You've outlived your enemies. She continued. You've controlled the city. Would you like to own it? No, Jake said, exhaling smoke that drifted like prophecy. I already do. A pause, then a chuckle, then murmurs of approval. They slid a leather binder across the table. Inside, deeds, ports, security clearances, an international account, seated with 9 figures. A crown made of paper and signatures. Jake closed the folder and leaned forward. Here's how this works. Vice stays mine, but now it flies your flag. Doom, you get your cuts, your quarters, but you don't touch the crew. And if you ever try what Eclipse did, I'll burn it all and salt the ashes. The woman smiled. Welcome to the board. As the elevator descended, Jake stood alone with his reflection, one man who had risen from the heat-soaked alleys of Ocean Drive to the very top of the city's hidden chain of command. He wasn't a survivor anymore. He wasn't even a ruler. He was a myth with a pulse. And as the casino's lights came into view, blinking through the rain, Jake Callahan felt something deeper than victory, legacy. Because in Vice City, power never dies, it just changes hands. And his grip was eternal. Asterisk weeks passed with an eerie quiet hanging over Vice City like the pause before the last thunderclap. Jake Callahan didn't take it for peace. He knew the silence was a curtain before the final act. The docks buzzed. Like usual roulette spinning, offshore deals, signed with a nod and a drink. Frankie cracking wise with the dignitaries who had once ignored his very name. Miranda, more composed than ever, moved through her intelligence networks like a conductor guiding an orchestra of shadows. They were winning, but Jake felt the edge dulling. Power, once fought for in blood and backroom grit, had started arriving in the form of tributes, silent handshakes, and quarterly forecasts. He was becoming what he once hunted. One night, after reviewing new acquisition contracts for a weapons plant near the Keys, Jake stepped onto the balcony of his penthouse. The city splayed beneath him like a jewel box, blinking with light, but it didn't pulse. Not for him, not anymore. Miranda joined him, a whiskey glass clinking softly against her ring. Another buyout, she said. Chimera's old Southport line, shipping rights. Full clearance to distribute whatever we want legally. Jake didn't respond right away. He watched the reflection of lightning in the surf. You ever wonder if this is it? He asked. The end game. She tilted her head. This city's never played by rules. Even when you win, the board keeps changing. We hold it for now. He exhaled sharply. I didn't get into this for peace. No, she said softly. But maybe peace got into you. The next morning, Frankie burst into the war room with a data chip and a look that could slice. Steel. We got chatter, he growled. The last of Chimera what's left of them pulled their funds into a black vault. It's not just a vault, a trap. They're waiting for you to come for it. Jake smiled. 3 nights later, Jake walked through the underbelly of a Swiss satellite bank disguised as a data center on an uncharted Caribbean island. Lights flickered, guards paced with deliberate unease. Frankie and Miranda had taken auxiliary teams through the emergency vents and control grid. Jake carried nothing but a revolver and the indifference of a man who had nothing left to lose. When he reached the vault, he found not a fight, but a scream. A single line of text. We knew you'd come. This is yours now, but it's never free. Behind him, a door hissed open. A woman stepped out, tall, silver-haired, immaculately dressed. One of the original 7 from that room atop Evergreen. You finished it, she said. They're all gone. Jake nodded once. She studied him, her expression both serene and tragic. Then you already understand what that means. Jake took a long look at the screen, then at her. Power wasn't a point, he said. Control was never what I needed. She raised an eyebrow. Then what did you want, Mr. Callahan? He looked past her, through the security glass at the vault, filled with codes and currencies that could shift borders, and he laughed quietly, deeply. I wanted to prove I could take a city like this and make it remember me. She almost smiled. It will. Jake turned and walked out, never touching the vault. The city, his city, no longer needed keys or flags. It pulsed in the rhythm of his name, in the echoes of his war, in the smoke curling from every rooftop nightclub that bore his fingerprint. Back at the docks, the sea, Jake lit a cigar and watched the storm like a man watching an old rival vanish into the horizon. Vice City had been conquered, and he had nothing left to take because he'd already become the myth it would never forget. And some nights, that was enough to other nights. He let the engine hum just in case the streets ever needed waking.
Hope you enjoyed, my friend. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. See you around.